Hello, and 大家好, back with a video on Chinese electric vehicle numbers. So let's dive into what's currently happening in the market, and you should watch this video if you are either invested in Tesla stock or in NIO stock, or if you're thinking about investing in those companies. Personally, I am invested in both, so yes, I am biased here. I'm a stock and a shareholder in both companies, so watch it with a grain of salt and stick with this video if you want to find out if this might be a good investment that you could do, and also if you want to learn more about the Chinese market, because in my point of view the Chinese market is the most interesting one to watch regarding electric vehicles. It's the biggest automotive market in the world, and also we see a quite quick adoption rate of EVs. So let's go. I will be talking about a couple of numbers, recent numbers about the SUV market, about Tesla in China, a couple of sales numbers, e-commerce and stuff like that. But before I'm gonna do that, let me quickly dive into the broader picture here, which is what the market is recently doing. And for this reason, let us quickly look at the S&P 500 and how it has performed. So first of all, of course, we had a big crash coming in, and I was actually jumping in too early about these levels here around 3,000 points after it dropped 15% more or less, and started investing in it, maybe calling it too early, because obviously then we still had a recent crash until the lower point of around 2,200 points. And but luckily I kept investing. I had some cash aside, and I kept pouring it into stocks, and I was holding it throughout the last recent weeks, where we've seen a recovery up to 20% in the S&P 500. And I have been making videos before that I'm kind of a proponent of a so-called V-shaped recovery, despite there's lots of YouTubers out there who are calling onto a new crash coming, and that, we have all the unemployment numbers and the economy will be hit very hard, making comparison to the Great Depression. I am more on the sideline that we will see a recovery also in the economic fundamentals, but for now the stock market seems also to jump ahead, and has risen 20% and now is kind of trading sidewards, and still it could become another correction here. Actually, during the last couple of weeks and days, we have seen a little bit of a correction here. So we didn't jump above 3,000 points. It's always kind of bouncing off this resistance around 2,950 points and then going back. But so far it also didn't break the 2,700 marks or 2,720 mark, which I'm watching closely. So if it goes below this line, I believe, yes, we will have a stronger correction coming in. But other than that, I don't really think we will revisit the lows of 2,200 points. That's just my personal opinion. That's how I have been trading so far. So I have most of my money actually going into the stock markets right now, and I do believe that we have a strong consumer coming back. We have so much of governmental support coming up, and also we do see that the institutions like the bond holders, they will go and buy up stocks. The Fed is helping and so on. So this is just my personal opinion, but I just want to give you this kind of a context why I'm currently bullish in stocks in general, even though we have an economic downturn certainly in the recent weeks, and also in the foreseeable next quarter reportings, that's for sure. But at the same time, I do think that the stocks could actually surprise by the end of the year and going into 2021. And that's kind of the baseline of why I'm also still investing in companies, for instance, like NIO currently, who obviously, whenever the stock market is dropping on the broader scope, then obviously NIO will be also affected dramatically. But at the same time, we see that stocks like Tesla have already recovered almost fully to where they have been in the past. So it also shows some positive signs here. And regarding the economic activity and also a possible V-shaped recovery, it was interesting to see Elon Musk tweeting yesterday about the usage of superchargers worldwide. So some internal data provided by Tesla, which is really interesting to watch, which we could see when China peaked Corona and when the lockdown happened and they bottomed around 30% of usage of the superchargers compared to the 100% highs in the past, and quickly recovering, actually driven by when the lockdown was released and mobility also picked up once again. And now interesting to see here also that Europe markets and US markets are actually, or the North American markets are actually kind of aligned here and are in sync when it comes to the recovery. And we can see we're more on the bottom side here of this recovery process yet in those regions, but it should be underway, and possibly this could also be used as a data point, just one of the data points, which is kind of showing that economic activity is coming back. And if there are not too many businesses that have been substantially hurt, we should possibly come out of this, and the consumer should come back, businesses should come back, and then actually we should get lots of potential economic activity driven by all of the subsidies and also all of the government programs that have been launched around the globe. So this is just my personal opinion of how I'm approaching the markets and when I'm buying and when I'm more conservative. So currently I do think it will get harder and harder to actually identify bargains in this market, because obviously we do have some economic pressure at the one side, and on the other side the stock markets have actually already begun to recover. So we had even investors like Buffett, being left on the sidelines, who didn't know how to trade this market, and possibly they kind of missed the lows. But I think that's a normal thing. There's no such thing as timing the markets correctly. On the other hand, I'm really glad that I, went in during the crisis, and currently it's treating me well so far. So yeah, please let me know in the comments below of how you have been acting during this crisis. Have you stayed invested, or have you actually sold your stock, or have you used this opportunity to buy some stock? And also maybe some of you are still on the sidelines and keeping cash. Please let me know what's your strategy right now, and also please give this video a like and a thumbs up if you enjoy this information. Now let's jump into the numbers of the electric vehicles sales and also in general productions in China, in the biggest EV market in the world. So first of all, let me show you this chart with some interesting April data, and this is data about the license plates that have been registered in China. And as you can see here in the luxury segment, just for SUVs, NIO is actually doing quite well. So they are outperforming most of the competitors, even outperforming Tesla if you compare it to Model X, which is obviously much more of an expensive car, but it's playing in this league and has actually similar performance data. And definitely if you compare it to the German OEMs like Mercedes-Benz with the Mercedes EQC and the Audi e-tron, which have significantly lower sales, or let's say license plate data here. So NIO is doing quite well, and this is actually a good indication of the consumer demand here shifting even in the luxury segment to a home-brewed company. So it's not the tech leader Tesla which is getting preferred here, and it's also not the legacy brands from Germany. And I do think the reason for that is that, first of all, for the Germans, they are not really pushing it hard in China yet. They don't really push the EV cars that they have. I think they are still preoccupied with selling off the internal combustion engine cars, particularly after, the Roni situation. Now they have lots of inventory and they need to get it out, and there is no need to invest too much money into campaigns about selling electric vehicles. At the same time, for Tesla, I do think we shouldn't be too worried about how Tesla is doing in this market segment here, because as I outlined, I think Model X is kind of in a little different league. It's like for people who really want a car to a little bit showing off and having something special. So of course there is not the biggest audience for this kind of cars, but at the same time it really shows here that with NIO's going ahead in this segment with a more mass market approach even, there should be a large demand in China for Model Y, and this is actually a very bullish signal for Tesla in China. So I don't read anything negative here into how Tesla is comparing to NIO. At the same time, NIO is really doing very well in this segment, and just imagine what they could do in other segments, for instance, selling sedans. And this actually leaves me with the question of at what point in time will the Germans actually go bigger into this market, and will they still be able to catch up once Tesla has launched the Model Y, and also once NIO is kind of improving those sales numbers on a regular basis. So if this number is really confirmed and manifests in sales numbers actually, and will be the sales numbers in the next 2 months to come, we will see a very strong quarter for NIO in Q2. So this is really interesting here to watch. And this is only April data, and is always, a little bit isolated, just looking at 1 month in particular. So here are the numbers for 2020 in general so far, and we can see that Tesla is doing really, really well in China, selling more than 23,000 cars already during 2020 and having a market share of roughly 20%. So this is already a really good market share for Tesla in China, even though they just started ramping up Gigafactory Shanghai. So it's possible actually that Tesla may actually increase the market share, which is mind-boggling if you imagine that, because the EV market in China is generally growing fast and will be really, really big in the future. And actually we should see that the market share for Tesla should be going down, because it would still be in absolute numbers a very significant market for them. But currently it looks like they will be leading the pack and are up massively and having a really good chunk of the market share here. And in this regard, it's interesting to see that most other competitors are actually losing market share here, and are actually going down year on year on the sales numbers, which is interesting because it is a quite hard market to compete in. And we have seen in the past that we had issues with the China subsidies where Tesla that kept lots of players alive that are actually have no real substance and are not able to survive on their own. And now we see that kind of that the market is getting cleaned up definitely throughout this crisis, and also because of the subsidies that have been taken away last year. They're now coming back, but with a higher threshold and with higher requirements towards the EV manufacturers. And so we see that, interestingly, it's now Tesla and NIO who are thriving in this kind of market environment. Interestingly here to see that Weltmeister, one of the brands, which is also a homebrewed startup in China, not doing that well anymore. I actually had the chance to ride in one of their cars in Shanghai. I did a test drive. I spoke to a couple of people at Weltmeister. They were really cool, really nice. I actually need to make a separate video on that. But it's interesting to see that they're kind of year on year not doing that well so far, because I actually had them on my short list of players to watch from China, because they are actually seeming to be quite successful in the mass market area, but still they are a startup, so possibly struggling, not IPO'd yet. So for them, it's also hard to compete in this market. And the issue with the German OEMs is that most of those EVs are possibly not compelling in terms of the performance, because they're usually higher priced. For instance, compared to NIO, as you can see here, the specs are not better. They don't have, for instance, any proprietary infrastructure in place. For instance, the battery swapping, they're not as good on the battery technology as well. And also none of those cars is actually built from the ground up, from scratch, as an electric vehicle. So I've been riding the EQC in Germany, which is actually a cool car, to be honest. Like, the quality is really well, but at the same time you can clearly see that it's just a combustion engine car that they have kind of modified to become a car with a battery. So I don't think, as long as they don't launch cars that are actually built from the ground up for being electric vehicles, that these cars will be successful. And it's a matter of time of how long they can still wait on actually launching those cars, because the market is not waiting for it. And if the players like Tesla and NIO, as you can see it here now, got established in those market segments, who will actually go and buy those cars that are getting launched much later? Another interesting player here to watch, which is actually also increasing year on year, is Xiaopeng, which is an Alibaba-backed company, which has recently come out with some new concept car features and launches, with actually some really big announcements on terms of how much range the car is having. I haven't driven it yet, so I don't have an own opinion on the car. I don't want to say about a lot about them so far until I haven't ridden the car myself. But there's definitely some fights going on between Tesla and Alibaba, because there seems to be some IP theft going on in the background, that actually regarding the autopilot, Xiaopeng has been stealing some data. We can still see lots of aspects being copied. So I think if we talk about the Chinese players, NIO is much more original in coming up with their own concepts and actually innovating on a couple of different aspects. So that's why I'm much more leaning towards NIO right now. Then we had another story regarding car sales in China. When the data came out about Tesla only selling 3,635 Model 3 in China during April. So I'm personally not very worried about the demand about Model 3 in China. Actually, quite the opposite. I'm quite bullish about the demand for Model 3 in China. And here's what I think the journalists got wrong and interpreted wrong about those numbers. So yes, they have produced 11,000 vehicles and only delivered around 3,600. But usually the first month in the quarter for Tesla is always a little bit lower. And here, additionally, we had some more factors coming into play. So Tesla possibly kind of made a mistake when they announced a long-range Model 3 in China on April 10th, and they announced it for around 339,000 yuan, which is not much price difference actually to the standard range. And they kind of changed the pricing once again on the 12th of May, and now it's 27% difference to the standard range. But in April, what has probably happened is that many Chinese consumers, which are very, very price sensitive. So I am running a e-commerce shop in China, and I can tell you that Chinese users are very much poisoned to get any discount that they can get. If you make price changes, it has really large effects on the conversion rates and stuff. And Tesla actually had a couple of issues in the past when Chinese consumers were actually protesting, showing banners in the shop that price reductions are not very well received among Chinese consumers. But as we know, Tesla is frequently changing prices. But in the Chinese market, it's possibly a difficult market for them to tackle, because Chinese consumers can really react strongly to that. And once again, so they made pricing changes there. And in April, possibly lots of Chinese consumers were possibly just trying to change their orders from the standard range towards the longer range one. And the second aspect which was playing into that is actually also the subsidies, on which I made a separate video about. Also was quite unsure how it will be relating to the Model 3 prices in China. So first of all, the Model 3 was not applicable to be included in those subsidies. Then Tesla changed the price of the standard range models in order to get included into the subsidies. And there's lots of speculation still on the internet, on Weibo and so on, about what will happen during the subsidies and also afterwards, and what kind of price changes Tesla will make. So possibly we see a strong reaction of Chinese consumers here in this regard, and Tesla really needs to kind of come up with a strategy that works in the future. And we possibly may see very strong sales in May and June to come, because obviously those consumers need to make a final decision on when they make the purchase and for which model in the end. But I think this has strongly affected the April numbers here. So these are some exciting numbers about the EV market in China. Generally, I think very positive for both NIO and Tesla. Still, lots of people try and spread fear among retail investors such as we are. And definitely we should watch those numbers closely, but try to interpret them in a way that they are actually making sense. Another interesting thing which I like to use to close here is that there are rumors about a battery day which is coming up, and which would actually have a large effect on China, because there are rumors floating around that actually the reductions in the price of the Tesla batteries will be first implemented in the Model 3 that are locally produced in China. So we could actually see much lower prices for Model 3, and we will first see them in China. So thereby Tesla could actually go and become even more mass market. So this is really interesting to see also from a growth perspective. If you watch the latest Gigafactory 3 footage in China, how fast they're growing in extending possibly even into battery manufacturing in Giga Shanghai. So all really exciting stuff. Please leave a like and comment down below what you think about EVs in China, about the market. And also please consider to support us on Patreon or join our network at network.dongxi.com, where you will find some inside information and where you can also connect with some peers and with other people who are investing into stocks in China. So thank you guys for watching, enjoy the weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.